In this lesson, we're going to be looking at how Google Shopping decides which products appear for a search and in what order. One of the most common misconceptions is that shopping rankings are primarily driven by budget. In reality, relevance comes first and bidding only comes into play after relevancy has been established. To understand that, we need to have a look at how Google matches search queries to products. When someone searches on Google Shopping, Google isn't searching your website, it's searching your product feed. And you might be surprised because not everything that you see on your website, such as your product titles or your attributes, they're not automatically carried over into your product feed. Google analyzes the user's search query and compares it to the following feed attributes: product titles, descriptions, brand, product type, Google product category, and other structured attributes. But what does this look like statistically? Approximately 80% of your search results are matched to words and phrases just in your product title. Google weights more importance towards these words that are at the start versus the ones that are at the end, so bear that in mind when you're thinking about the priority of your word order. Just as important, 15% of all search terms your shopping ads are shown for match words and phrases in your product descriptions. Whilst Google recommends up to 5,000 characters in your product description, our testing at Shoptimised has found that a product description between 500 to 1,500 characters can actually increase impressions by up to 30%. Product types are often overlooked, but Google match roughly 5% of search terms to the information within your product type. Be careful not to stuff or cram the keywords in there, because that is against Google's policy. Based on this data, Google builds a pool of products that it finds relevant to that query. If a product doesn't appear relevant based on its feed data, then it simply doesn't make it to the auction. And this is an important point to reiterate. Ranking only happens once relevancy has been established. Previously, third-party cookies actually helped platforms track users across the web, and that would make it easier to predict purchase intent and serve highly behavior-relevant ads. But as privacy changes have actually restricted cross-site tracking and retargeting, Google relies more on the contextual signals, which makes feed optimization even more important for showing the right products to the right shoppers. Once Google has a set of relevant products, that's when bidding comes into play. Bids and budgets will then help determine how frequently a product appears, but also how aggressively it will compete against other relevant products or wider search terms. For example, if you have higher bids and budgets, you'll appear higher in the carousel. But bids cannot make an irrelevant product relevant. If the feed doesn't clearly communicate what a product actually is, higher bids might introduce it to wider or more competitive search terms, but it won't force it to show for the right searches. And this is why changing bidding strategy or increasing budgets often increase spend without meaningfully improving performance or coverage. So you could think about it as the relevance sets the ceiling and your bidding operates within that. But over time, Google also factors in performance history. As products receive more impressions, more clicks and conversions, Google eventually learns how they perform for different types of searches. One of the main gauges that Google builds is expected click-through rate, but that's something that we'll discuss at a later date. This learning helps Google decide when to show a product, how often to show it, and how confidently it should compete in future auctions. Products with clearer relevance and consistent performance tend to build stronger signals over time. This is why feed quality doesn't just affect launch performance, it affects how Google can learn and optimize going forward. As a side note, this is a reason why brands that refresh product lines can find it harder to latch on to product winners. One of the attributes that is often underestimated is the Google product category. Google uses product categories to understand what type of product something is, where it belongs in its taxonomy, and which other products it should be compared against. Having accurate categories help Google match products to the right types of searches and placements. Broad or incorrect or missing categories can limit visibility, even if the title's budget strategy looks strong. We have found that product feeds with no product categories versus with can see up to a 27% increase in cost per click. So at this point, it might be clearer why some products never seem to show, even if all the other elements are aligned. To recap some of the common reasons, they include missing or incomplete feed attributes, vague or generic titles, incorrect categorization, weak relevant signals, or just limited historical data. In these cases, the product isn't being outbid, it's being filtered out before the bidding even begins, and that's not a campaign problem, that's a feed problem. The key takeaway from this lesson is Google Shopping and other marketplaces are relevance first. Your product feed decides whether or not a product can or cannot compete, but your bidding decides how it can compete. In the next lesson, we'll dive into what product feed actually is and what that would look like for your product feed.